February 22nd, 1944. 23,000 feet above the French countryside, Major James Howard scans the sky through the canopy of his P-51 Mustang. Below him, 35 B-17 Flying Fortresses from the 401st Bombardment Group lumber toward their target at Oschersleben, Germany. The bomber crews are alone. Their escort fighters have turned back due to fuel constraints, and the Luftwaffe knows it. At 13:47 hours, the attack begins. 30 German fighters, a mix of Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s, dive from the sun. Howard is the only American fighter between them and the bombers. For the next 30 minutes, he will engage in what military historians call the most remarkable single-handed defense in aviation history. He shoots down at least 4 enemy aircraft, damages several more, and breaks up attack after attack. Every single bomber returns to base. But Howard's heroics mask a darker truth. In the previous 6 months, the 8th Air Force has lost 1,164 heavy bombers over Europe. That's 17,640 American airmen killed or captured. The bomber crews call the missions milk runs when losses stay below 5%. When losses exceed 10%, they don't have a name for it. They just stop talking. The fighter escort doctrine isn't working. Fighters fly in tight, defensive formations close to the bombers, exactly as the textbooks prescribe. And bombers keep falling from the sky in flames. What the commanders at 8th Air Force Headquarters don't know is that one fighter group commander has been secretly testing a completely different approach, an approach that violates every established principle of fighter tactics, an approach that, on paper, should get his pilots killed. Instead, it's about to change the course of the air war over Europe. The problem begins in August 1943, when the 8th Air Force commits to daylight precision bombing of Germany. The theory is elegant. American B-17 and B-24 bombers, flying in tight defensive formations with overlapping fields of fire, can fight their way to any target in Europe and back. British Air Marshal Arthur Harris calls it an American delusion. He's almost right. On August 17, 1943, the 8th Air Force launches a dual strike against Schweinfurt and Regensburg. Of the 376 bombers dispatched, 60 are shot down. That's a 16% loss rate in a single day. The ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt are hit again on October 14th. This time, 291 bombers attack. 60 are destroyed, 17 more are damaged beyond repair, and 121 return with battle damage. The mission enters history as Black Thursday. The mathematics are brutal. At these loss rates, the average bomber crew has a 7% chance of surviving a 25-mission tour. Fighter Command knows the bombers need protection, but the doctrine is clear. Fighters must stay close to the bomber formations, matching their speed and altitude, ready to intercept attackers. It's called close escort, and it's killing American airmen. The close escort formations have their roots in World War I fighter tactics. Fighters fly in tight finger-four formations, each element of 4 aircraft maintaining visual contact, turning together, attacking together. The doctrine emphasizes mutual support and coordinated action. Fighter pilots are trained to never break formation, never chase an enemy aircraft away from the bombers, never pursue. But the Luftwaffe has adapted. German fighter pilots have learned to attack from head-on, diving through the bomber formations at closing speeds of over 600 miles per hour. By the time the American escort fighters can react, turn, and pursue, the German fighters have already fired, broken off, and disappeared. The close escort fighters are always reacting, never attacking, always one step behind. Lieutenant General Ira Eaker, commander of the 8th Air Force, brings in the experts: fighter tacticians from the RAF, combat veterans from North Africa, training command instructors. They all agree. The solution is more fighters flying closer to the bombers, tighter formations, better coordination, more discipline. In December 1943, Eaker issues a directive reinforcing close escort procedures. Fighter groups are explicitly ordered to maintain position with the bomber stream and not to pursue enemy aircraft. The losses continue. In the first 3 months of 1944, the 8th Air Force loses 712 heavy bombers. That's nearly 8 bombers every single day. Colonel Hub Zemke doesn't look like a revolutionary. At 30 years old, he's a career officer with a by-the-book reputation. He graduated from the University of Montana, not West Point. He learned to fly in civilian flight schools, not at Randolph Field. He has no advanced tactical training, no staff college credentials, no connections to the fighter establishment. What he has is command of the 56th Fighter Group based at Boxted, England, and a growing conviction that the experts are wrong. Zemke's path to command is unconventional. He spent 2 years as a technical observer in Russia, studying Soviet fighter tactics. He watched Russian pilots operate with a freedom American doctrine would never permit: wide spacing, individual initiative, aggressive pursuit of enemy aircraft. The Russians lost aircraft, but they destroyed German formations before they could reach their targets. The math worked differently. When Zemke takes command of the 56th in January 1943, he inherits a group flying P-47 Thunderbolts, powerful, heavily armed fighters that excel at high-altitude combat. But doctrine chains them to the bombers, forcing them to throttle back, burn fuel, maintaining position, and wait for the Luftwaffe to attack. It's like watching a heavyweight boxer fight with his hands tied. The moment of insight comes on January 11th, 1944. Zemke is leading an escort mission to Oschersleben when he spots a formation of German fighters assembling 20 miles ahead of the bomber stream. They're organizing for a coordinated attack, and Zemke's fighters are too far back to intercept. He watches the Germans complete their formation and dive toward the bombers. His fighters arrive just in time to see the B-17s taking hits. 3 bombers go down. Zemke's group claims 2 German fighters destroyed. That night, Zemke sits in his office at Boxted and does the mathematics. The 56th Fighter Group flew perfect close escort. They maintained position, followed doctrine, protected the bombers, and the bombers died anyway. The German fighters had all the time they needed to organize their attack because the American fighters were in the wrong place. Behind the bombers, not ahead of them. Zemke pulls out tactical maps and begins sketching. What if the fighters didn't stay with the bombers? What if they flew ahead of the bomber stream, positioning themselves between the bombers and the known German fighter bases? What if they spread out in a loose screen, covering more airspace, hunting for German formations before they could organize? The doctrine says this is wrong. Every instinct says it might work. Zemke doesn't ask permission. On January 14, 1944, he quietly briefs his squadron commanders on a new tactical approach. The 56th Fighter Group will fly what he calls freelance sweeps, ranging 15 to 20 miles ahead of the bomber stream, spread out in loose formations covering maximum airspace, with orders to attack any German fighters they encounter. The reaction is immediate. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin, one of Zemke's top aces, speaks first. "Colonel, that's not escort. That's abandoning the bombers." Major David Schilling, commander of the 62nd Fighter Squadron, is more direct. "Hub, they'll court-martial you. Fighter Command's directive is explicit. Maintain position with the bombers." Zemke's response is quiet but firm. The directive says, protect the bombers. It doesn't say how. He explains the logic. If they can break up German formations before they reach the bombers, they're providing better protection than if they wait and react to attacks. We're not abandoning anyone. We're hunting. The first test comes on January 24th, 1944. The target is Frankfurt, and the 56th Fighter Group launches with 48 P-47s. Instead of joining the bomber stream, Zemke leads his group ahead, climbing to 30,000 feet, spreading his squadrons across a front 20 miles wide. They're over Belgium when they spot them, 40 German fighters assembling at 25,000 feet, clearly preparing to intercept the bombers still 30 miles behind. Zemke doesn't wait. He leads his group in a diving attack, hitting the German formation before they can organize. The fight is chaotic and violent. The Germans, caught by surprise, break formation. Some try to fight, others dive away. The P-47s chase them down. In 15 minutes of combat, the 56th Fighter Group claims 11 German fighters destroyed. The bombers pass through unmolested. Not a single B-17 is lost to fighter attack. When Zemke lands at Boxted, there's a message waiting. Report to 8 Fighter Command Headquarters immediately. Lieutenant General William Kepner, the fighter commander, wants to know why the 56th Fighter Group was 15 miles ahead of its assigned position. Zemke knows what's coming. He violated doctrine, disobeyed the escort directive, and took his entire group out of position. The fact that it worked doesn't matter if the system won't let him do it again. The conference room at Waich Fighter Command Headquarters in Bushy Hall is crowded on January 26, 1944. General Kepner sits at the head of the table, flanked by his operations staff and tactical advisors. Zemke stands at the far end alone. The other fighter group commanders are present, watching. Colonel Cass Howe, the operations officer, opens the discussion. Colonel Zemke, you were ordered to provide close escort to the bomber stream. Instead, your group was 15 miles out of position. Can you explain? Zemke doesn't apologize. He walks to the map board and traces the route. We were exactly where we needed to be, between the German fighters and our bombers. We intercepted a 40-plane enemy formation before it could attack. We destroyed 11 enemy aircraft. 0 bombers lost to fighters. That's the mission. The room erupts. Colonel Evelyn Takon, a fighter tactician from the staff, stands. You violated fundamental principles of escort. The doctrine exists for a reason, to maintain coverage over the bombers. What if the Germans had attacked from a different direction while you were off chasing glory? Major James Howard, recently transferred to headquarters after his Medal of Honor action, adds, the bombers need to see their escort. It's psychological as much as tactical. When the crews can't see fighters, they panic. Zemke faces them. The bomber crews don't need to see fighters. They need to not see German fighters. Every German we destroy before he reaches the bomber stream is one less gun firing at our boys. We can kill them over Belgium, or we can watch them kill bombers over Germany. I know which I prefer. Colonel Hub Zemke's voice rises. The doctrine is failing. We're losing bombers at unsustainable rates because we're always reacting, never attacking. The Luftwaffe organizes their formations while we fly parade routes next to the bombers. By the time they attack, it's too late. We need to disrupt their formations before they can attack. The argument continues for 90 minutes. The staff officers cite doctrine, training manuals, lessons from previous wars. Zemke cites loss rates, kill ratios, and dead airmen. The tactical advisors insist close escort provides better coverage. Zemke argues that preventing attacks provides better protection than reacting to them. General Kepner has been silent, listening. Finally, he stands. The room goes quiet. Kepner is a fighter pilot himself, a veteran of the pursuit squadrons in the 1930s. He looks at the map, then at Zemke, then at his staff. Gentlemen, we're losing this air war. The numbers don't lie. Colonel Zemke's approach worked. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it's genius. But we need to find out. He turns to Zemke. Hub, you have 30 days. Fly your freelance sweeps. Document everything: positions, timing, results. If it works, we'll consider changing doctrine. If it fails, we'll have this conversation again, and it won't be pleasant. If you're finding this story as fascinating as I am researching it, consider subscribing. We release 2 military history deep dives every week, covering the innovations and individuals that changed warfare forever. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. Over the next 4 weeks, the 56th Fighter Group flies 12 escort missions using Zemke's freelance tactics. The results are documented in mission reports that still exist in the National Archives. On February 3, 1944, escorting a strike on Wilhelmshaven, the 56th intercepts a German formation 30 miles from the bombers. They claim 8 enemy aircraft destroyed, 0 bombers lost. February 8th, target Frankfurt, 16 German fighters destroyed, 2 bombers lost to flak, none to fighters. February 10th, Brunswick, 12 enemy aircraft destroyed, 1 bomber lost when it collided with a German fighter. The statistics tell the story. In January 1944, before Zemke's tactics, bomber missions escorted by the 56th Fighter Group suffered an average fighter attack loss rate of 4.2%. In February, with freelance sweeps, the rate drops to 0.8%. The 56th kill ratio, enemy aircraft destroyed versus friendly losses, jumps from 2.1.1 to 7.3.1. But numbers on paper don't capture what's happening in the sky. On February 20th, 1944, the 8th Air Force launches Operation Argument, later known as Big Week, a coordinated campaign to destroy German aircraft production. It's the largest air offensive of the war, with over 3,300 bomber sorties planned over 6 days. The Luftwaffe commits everything to stopping it. February 22nd, 1944, is the peak of Big Week. The target is Schweinfurt, again. The bomber crews remember Black Thursday. They know what's coming. Colonel Zemke leads the 56th Fighter Group on the escort mission, but this time, 8 Fighter Command has authorized other groups to experiment with freelance tactics. The 4th Fighter Group and the 78th Fighter Group are also flying ahead of the bomber stream. At 12:15 hours, over Koblenz, Germany, the 56th Fighter Group spots them, 70-plus German fighters, Me-109s, FW-190s, and twin-engine Me-110s, assembling in a massive formation. It's the largest concentration of Luftwaffe fighters Zemke has ever seen. They're organized in layers, from 20,000 to 30,000 feet, clearly preparing for a coordinated attack on the bomber stream that's still 25 miles behind. Zemke doesn't hesitate. He leads his group into the attack. What follows is one of the largest air battles of the European War. The P-47s hit the German formation from above, diving through the layers, breaking up the organization. The Germans try to maintain formation, but the surprise is complete. Individual dogfights erupt across 50 miles of sky. Captain Robert Johnson, flying Zemke's wing, later describes the scene. The sky was full of airplanes, all turning, all shooting. I'd never seen so many German fighters in one place. But they were scattered, disorganized. We'd hit them before they were ready. The battle lasts 45 minutes. The 56th Fighter Group claims 23 enemy aircraft destroyed. The 4th Fighter Group, also flying freelance sweeps, claims 19. The 78th adds 12 more. When the bombers reach Schweinfurt, they face only scattered, uncoordinated attacks. Of the 238 bombers dispatched, only 11 are lost to fighter attack, a loss rate of 4.6%, compared to the 26% loss rate on Black Thursday 4 months earlier. The German perspective comes from captured Luftwaffe pilots. Oberleutnant Heinz Knoke, a veteran German fighter pilot, writes in his diary, "The American fighters are everywhere now. They no longer wait for us to attack the bombers. They hunt us like wolves, hitting us before we can organize. Our losses are becoming unbearable. Another captured pilot, Unteroffizier Franz Stiegler, tells interrogators, "We used to have time to form up, brief our attack, coordinate our approach. Now the Americans are on us before we're ready. They're always above us, always ahead of us. We're fighting on their terms now." By the end of Big Week, the results are undeniable. The 8th Air Force flies 3,300 heavy bomber sorties and loses 137 bombers, a 4.1% loss rate. Before freelance escort tactics, the average loss rate on deep penetration missions was 8.3%. The new tactics have cut bomber losses in half. More importantly, the Luftwaffe has lost an estimated 355 fighters, and more critically, 100 experienced pilots killed or captured. The Germans can replace the aircraft. They cannot replace the pilots. Before we continue, a quick word about why this channel exists. We believe military history isn't just about battles and weapons. It's about the individuals who saw problems differently and had the courage to challenge the system. If you believe these stories matter, please like this video and share it with someone who loves history. Your support keeps these deep dives coming. Now, back to the story. On March 2, 1944, WWII's Fighter Command issues a new tactical directive. All fighter groups are authorized to fly freelance escort missions, ranging ahead of bomber formations to intercept enemy fighters before they can organize attacks. The directive explicitly states that fighter commanders have discretion to position their forces where they can best protect the bombers, even if that means operating out of visual range of the bomber stream. Close escort is no longer mandatory. It's one option among many. The impact is immediate and measurable. In March 1944, the 8th Air Force loses 283 heavy bombers, but only 72 are lost to fighter attack. The rest are lost to flak, mechanical failure, or weather. The Luftwaffe, which destroyed an average of 120 bombers per month in late 1943, is now destroying fewer than 80. By April, German fighter losses exceed 450 aircraft. The Luftwaffe is being bled white. Individual bomber crews notice the difference. Lieutenant Robert Morgan, pilot of the Memphis Belle, writes home, "The fighters are different now. We don't always see them, but we know they're out there. The Germans don't get through anymore. The boys up front are doing something right." Staff Sergeant Benjamin Warmer, a ball turret gunner on a B-17, later recalls, "We used to see German fighters every mission. They'd come at us in waves and we'd just hold on and hope. After February 44, we'd see our fighters tearing into the Germans miles before they reached us. Sometimes we'd watch the whole fight happen way out ahead. The Germans would be scattered, disorganized, easy pickings for the escorts. We knew someone had changed the game." The lives saved are calculable. In the 4 months before freelance escort tactics, the 8th Air Force lost an average of 178 bombers per month to fighter attack. In the 4 months after, the average drops to 68. That's 110 bombers per month not shot down. Each bomber carries 10 crew members. The new tactics are saving approximately 100 American lives every month. The war ends on May 8, 1945. By then, freelance escort has become standard doctrine not just for the 8th Air Force, but for all American fighter operations in Europe and the Pacific. The principle, position fighters, where they can intercept enemy aircraft before they reach friendly bombers, seems obvious in retrospect. In early 1944, it was heresy. Hub Zemke survives the war, though barely. In October 1944, his P-47 breaks apart in a thunderstorm over Germany. He bails out, is captured, and spends the last 7 months of the war in Stalag Luftwaffe. He's liberated by Soviet forces in May 1945. He never discusses his innovations, never claims credit for changing fighter tactics. When reporters ask about his role in the air war, he redirects to his pilots. They did the fighting. I just tried to put them in position to win. The production numbers tell part of the story. The 56th Fighter Group, Zemke's unit, is credited with 674.5 enemy aircraft destroyed, more than any other fighter group in the 8th Air Force. They lose 128 pilots killed in action. Before freelance tactics, their kill ratio was 2.3.1. After February 1944, it rises to 6.8.1. The mathematics of survival shift decisively in favor of American pilots and bomber crews. The German perspective offers validation from an unexpected source. After the war, General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, commander of Luftwaffe fighter forces, writes, "The change in American fighter tactics in early 1944 was devastating. Previously, we could organize our attacks and overwhelm sections of the bomber stream. After February, the American fighters were always ahead of us, always above us, breaking up our formations before we could attack. It was the beginning of the end for the Luftwaffe fighter force." Individual bomber crews never forget. In 1947, a group of B-17 veterans tracks down Zemke at his home in Montana. They present him with a plaque that reads, "To Colonel Hub Zemke, because of you, we came home." The crews of the 401st Bombardment Group. Zemke keeps it in a drawer. He doesn't display it. When his children ask about it years later, he says only, "I did my job. They did theirs. We all came home. That's what matters." The tactical innovation spreads beyond World War II. During the Korean War, F-86 Sabre pilots flying MiG Alley use freelance tactics to intercept Chinese and North Korean fighters before they can reach UN bombers. In Vietnam, the Navy's Top Gun program teaches aggressive, offensive fighter tactics based on the same principle: intercept the enemy before he reaches his target. Modern fighter doctrine, from the F-15 to the F-22, emphasizes offensive counter-air operations, using fighters to establish air superiority by destroying enemy aircraft before they can threaten friendly forces. The principle has become so fundamental to air combat that it's easy to forget it was once controversial. Fighter pilots no longer fly close escort, matching speed with bombers, waiting to react. They hunt. They position themselves between the enemy and the target. They attack formations, not individual aircraft. They disrupt, not just defend. These concepts seem obvious because Hub Zemke made them work when the experts said they couldn't. Zemke retires from the Air Force in 1966 as a colonel. He refuses promotion to general, preferring to remain a pilot rather than become an administrator. He settles in California, works as an aerospace consultant, and avoids publicity. When military historians try to interview him about his tactical innovations, he declines. "It wasn't innovative," he tells one persistent researcher. "It was common sense. Put your fighters between the enemy and your bombers. Kill the enemy before he can kill your boys." Any fighter pilot would have figured it out eventually. But they didn't. Hub Zemke did. And because he had the courage to ignore doctrine, challenge experts, and trust his instincts, thousands of American bomber crews came home. The mathematics of survival changed. The air war turned. And one man who refused to accept that the experts were right saved more lives than he ever knew. The lesson isn't about fighter tactics. It's about the courage to see problems clearly, even when the solution violates everything you've been taught. It's about trusting data over doctrine, results over reputation. It's about understanding that sometimes the textbook is wrong, and the only way to discover the truth is to test it yourself, regardless of the cost. Hub Zemke died in 1994 at age 81. His obituary in the New York Times runs 4 paragraphs. It mentions his combat record, but says nothing about freelance escort tactics, nothing about changing doctrine, nothing about the lives saved. That's exactly how he would have wanted it. The bombers came home. That was enough.